Gillette Stadium, 49 degrees and rainy, January 18, 2015, 9 minutes and 21 seconds remaining in the second quarter of the AFC Championship game.
Make it to him, Brady, middle, intercepted by Jackson.
Jackson, beaming with pride at one of his career accomplishments and giving his team hope since they were already down 14-0, runs the ball to the Colts equipment staff for safekeeping. That ball, an important piece of history for Jackson, would never end up back in his hands as it quickly became a significant part of an almost 2-year story that made national news headlines and spurred an investigation against the New England Patriots and yet another cheating accusation against the AFC dynasty. This scenario taking on the name Deflategate, because that intercepted ball was discovered by the Colts staff to be severely underinflated, and in turn, they blew the whistle.
Dear Tom Brady, do you remember that game we played 4 years ago in the AFC Championship? You may not remember, but you sent Grunt on a seam route down the middle and I picked it off. Boy, did that feel so good. I mean, you never throw them. Anyways, I gave the football to the Colts equipment guys. They wrote my name and my initial on that football. Here's the up part. I never got my ball back. The NFL said it was deflated. Then Bill Belichick and Bill Nye, the science guy, had a contest over PSI levels. Roger Goodell probably has my football on his damn mantle. Look, Tom, you beat our ass fair and square. I've accepted it and I've moved on. But now I'm asking you man to man and father to father. Please help me get my football back. Boy, do I feel inflated. Sincerely yours, your friend, Jaquel Jackson.
Did the New England Patriots intentionally underinflate footballs to gain an advantage in the wet conditions in Foxborough on that Sunday in January? Or did the NFL take a complaint too far, and due to the lack of due diligence in disciplining the Patriots in the past, did the league start a firestorm out of a wet cinder? Also, can someone please just give Jaquel Jackson his football back? It's probably really flat by now. What's going on, guys? Your boy Mike here, and today we're going to be jumping into yet another Tom Brady conspiracy/scandal. On this channel, we've already done videos on Tom's stolen jersey and, of course, on Spygate. Before we get to the content, I just wanted to let you guys know we're giving away a PlayStation 5 to a subscriber that turns on our notifications on this channel. Whether you're an old subscriber or a new subscriber, if you sub and hit that notification bell, you have entered for a chance to win a PS5. If you want additional entries, I highly recommend you follow us on Instagram and Twitter, because that will give you an opportunity to get your takes featured in the content. Now that we got all that out of the way, break!
When I pick those balls out, at that point, to me, they're perfect. I don't want anyone touching the balls after that. I don't want anyone rubbing them, putting any air in them, taking any air out. To me, those balls are perfect.
That's what she said.
For the AFC Championship game in 2015, like all others, both teams are to provide 12 footballs to be used, with all 24 footballs to be inspected and approved by the NFL officials before each game begins. As the story goes, Mike Kenzel, who was at the game and at the time serving as the Vice President of Operations for the NFL, had received an email from Colts General Manager Ryan Grigson before the kickoff inquiring that the league should have a heads up for ball deflation trickery. So the rumor is that the Baltimore Ravens had tipped off Ryan Grigson following their loss to the New England Patriots in the divisional round, as the Baltimore Ravens allegedly noticed that some of the balls were a little flat. At halftime of that AFC Championship game, Grigson ran to Kenzel and said, "We are playing with small balls." No, that's literally what he said. Kenzel also reportedly told Patriots equipment manager Dave Schoenfeld shortly after halftime, "We weighed the ball and you're in big in trouble. Then hours after the AFC Championship, the rumblings really began surrounding the Patriots footballs that they had used for the game and that they weren't quite right. First, WHTR.com's Bob Kravitz was the first to tweet saying the NFL was investigating that perhaps the Patriots had underinflated their footballs for the AFC Championship. Bob elaborated that a deflated football would be significantly easier to throw and catch in inclement weather, such as the wet weather at Gillette Stadium that day, than a properly inflated ball. Kravitz said a source within the NFL told him that the officials took a ball out of play at one point during the game to weigh it. In the NFL's official rulebook, rule number 2 states a range of 12.5 to 13.5 psi for footballs used in games. That specific range has been in place for many years and was a recommendation by the company who produces the football, much like how car tires have a recommended PSI printed on the side. A few days following the AFC Championship, ESPN's Chris Mortensen published a story leaked from Kenzel, writing that 11 of 12 Patriots footballs were 2 pounds below the league-mandated pounds per square inch threshold. Note that several months later, Mortensen deleted tweets about that story and was later proven to be incorrect. The term Deflategate was officially coined and made all the national newscasts. The next day, Bill Belichick and Tom Brady held press conferences at Gillette Stadium denying they knew anything about the footballs.
Tom's personal preferences on his footballs are something that he can talk about in much better detail and information than I could possibly provide. I could tell you that in my entire coaching career, I have never talked to any player, staff member about football air pressure. That is not a subject that I have ever brought up.
Belichick basically punted all future questions regarding the matter to Brady.
When I pick those balls out, at that point, to me, they're perfect. I don't want anyone touching the balls after that. I don't want anyone rubbing them, putting any air in them, taking any air out. To me, those balls are perfect, and that's what I expect when I show up on the field.
On January 23rd, the NFL released a statement which they lengthily explained, "Our office has been conducting an investigation as to whether the footballs used in last Sunday's AFC Championship game complied with the specifications that are set forth in playing the rules. The investigation is being led jointly by NFL Executive Vice President Jeff Pash and Ted Wells of the law firm Paul Weiss. The investigation began promptly on Sunday night. Over the past several days, nearly 40 interviews have been conducted, including of Patriots personnel, game officials, and third parties with relevant information and expertise. We have obtained and are continuing to obtain additional information, including video and other electronic information and physical evidence. While the evidence thus far supports the conclusion that footballs that were underinflated were used by the Patriots in the first half, the footballs were properly inflated for the second half and confirmed at the conclusion of the game to have remained properly inflated. The goals of the investigation will be to determine the explanation for why footballs used in the game were not in compliance with the playing rules, and specifically whether any non-compliance was the result of deliberate action. We have not made any judgments on these points and will not do so until we have concluded our investigation and considered all of the relevant evidence." The next day, Bill Belichick in another press conference says,
I'm not a scientist. I'm not an expert in footballs. I'm not an expert in football measurements. I'm just telling you what I know. Would not say that I'm Mona Lisa Vito of the football world.
in which he was referring to the 1992 movie My Cousin Vinny, comparing the Deflategate investigation to a character from the film whose expertise was influential in proving the other character's innocence. That statement not only was a bit weird, but showed the world that Bill Belichick actually does something other than plot against the NFL deep in his lair. He also watches movies. Bill Belichick also took a moment to share with the media and those watching a science lesson of sort, saying he spent a lot of time learning about ball inflation, stating,
And that's what we found. We found that once the footballs were on the field over an extended period of time, in other words, they were adjusted to the climatic conditions, and also the fact that the balls, reached an equilibrium without the rubbing process, that after that had, run its course and the footballs had reached an equilibrium, that they were down approximately 1.5 pounds per square inch.
On January 26th, the Patriots arrive in Phoenix for the Super Bowl, and Robert Kraft tells the media,
"The Wells investigation is not able to definitively determine that our organization tampered with the air pressure in the footballs. I would expect and hope that the league would apologize to our entire team, and in particular, Coach Belichick and Tom Brady."
Yeah, the NFL wouldn't end up doing that. A few days later, the Patriots would win the Super Bowl by beating the Seattle Seahawks in a riveting 28-24 game on the back of Malcolm Butler sealing the deal with an extremely heroic interception after many iconic plays were made during the game. The Wells investigation is still ongoing at this point, but no one is really waiting in anticipation of the results, mainly because the Super Bowl was freaking awesome. A few months later, on May 6th, the Wells report is finally released and is centered around text messages from an equipment assistant's phone who called himself as, quote-unquote, the Deflator. And it is discovered on that January day, there was a pregame detour of a locker room attendant who took the game balls into the bathroom with him before the game. The report then states that Tom Brady was at least generally aware of the alleged ball deflation scheme. Fans of the Patriots would argue that the report found that there was no solid evidence that air was released from the footballs, or evidence that Brady asked the Patriots employee to do any deflating in that specific instance. However, the report shows that there were a lot of text messages between Jim McNally, the Patriots official locker room attendant who seems to have been the chief ball deflator, who is also the guy who referred to himself as the Deflator, and John Jastrzemski, an equipment assistant who worked more closely with Brady. The texts between these two guys who spend their time living in locker rooms are frat-like, hard to read for the scholarly type, and uncover a bad-tempered relationship centered around deflating footballs and McNally's strong hatred for Tom Brady. However, there are no text messages from Tom Brady's phone, as he had refused to hand it over and even had destroyed what he called his broken phone. Arguments against the NFL would say that halftime inflation measurement was a rushed and haphazard effort. Also, the Patriots would investigate with scholars from MIT and other higher education institutions, but would never confirm the accuracy of events of the PSI measurement. One professor did explain that the atmospheric conditions, aka the weather, based on the ideal gas law, could do the same thing of naturally deflating a ball. Just like on that first crisp fall morning and all of a sudden your tire has low tire pressure. However, that law is typically observed when the temperature is close to freezing. The same day that the Wells report was released, John Jastrzemski and the Deflator were indefinitely suspended without pay by the team. The NFL then announced that the two employees could not be reinstated without NFL Vice President Troy Vincent's approval, and went on to say if they are reinstated by the Patriots, Jastrzemski is prohibited from having any role in the preparation, supervision, or handling of footballs to be used in NFL games during the 2015 season. McNally is barred from serving as a locker room attendant for the game officials, or having any involvement with the preparation, supervision, or handling of footballs or any other equipment on game day. They were later reinstated, but exited the team a short while later. On May 11th, the NFL brought the hammer down on the Patriots, suspending Tom Brady for 4 games, beginning Game 1 of the upcoming season, taking away the Patriots' first and fourth round draft picks, and fining the organization $1 million. On May 14th, the Patriots go all in on trying to debunk the Wells report and said that McNally called himself the Deflator because he was trying to lose weight. What a coincidence. On May 14th, Brady appeals his suspension, but the Patriots announce a few days later that they won't appeal their suspensions. In June, Roger Goodell, although he lacks legal experience and his education is a Washington and Jefferson undergraduate degree in economics, announces that he would be serving as the arbiter in Brady's appeal. The NFLPA requests a third party, but the NFL says no. On June 23rd and 25th, the hearing is upheld in New York City and is excruciatingly long. From the transcript, Tom Brady says, in regards to being asked if he requested for changes in air pressure of the footballs, says no, absolutely not. Brady, during his hearing, also gave his reasoning for having phones destroyed on the regular. Again, Tom said via the transcript, "I think whenever I'm done with the phone, I don't want anybody ever to see the content of the phone or the photos. Obviously, there's a log with the smartphones of all my email communication, so in those folders, there is player contracts. There's, endorsement deals. There's along with my photos of my family and so forth that I just don't want anyone to ever come in contact with those." On July 28th, Roger Goodell announces that Tom Brady's suspension is upheld following with a statement saying that Brady destroyed his phone to hide the Deflategate evidence. He also changes the general awareness term that Wells used and said Brady knew of, approved of, consented to, and provided inducements and rewards to support the alleged ball deflation scheme. At that point, Tom Brady probably replaces a picture of Eli Manning on his dartboard with a picture of Roger Goodell. The media states that they expect Tom Brady will try to get his suspension overturned, this time in federal court. The NFL for the next season announces that they will begin taking exact measurements of game balls before the game and at halftime to record the findings. However, those findings were destroyed by the NFL and never distributed to the teams or the public after that season. And on a side note, since the Deflategate incident, the NFL hasn't issued a warning or rules violation to any team regarding improper air pressure in game balls. On August 4th, the hearing transcript is released, and it is uncovered that Goodell manipulated Brady's testimony in his written decision to uphold Brady's suspension. I guess that's what happens when you don't have a lawyer arbitrating a case. But I digress. On the same day, 1,400 of Tom Brady's emails are released, but the media focuses on non-Deflategate topics like Tom Brady mocking Peyton Manning by saying he was in his final years, Tom referring to his offensive coordinator, Josh McDaniels, as Babe, and lengthy stories on Tom Brady really wanting a white pool cover and getting super pissed when one wasn't available. 9 days later, Tom Brady is back in a courtroom for a settlement hearing in New York City in front of Judge Berman. The hearing continues into the next week, and the judge condemns the NFL for not making the Wells Report co-editor, Jeff Pash, serve as a witness in the Brady appeal hearing. Berman is also concerned that Roger Goodell was comparing deflating footballs on the same line as using steroids. Another week passes, and both sides meet for a third hearing and inform the court that a settlement has not been reached. Judge Berman says he will issue a decision soon. On September 3rd, Tom Brady wins his appeal via Judge Berman stating, "With respect to general awareness of others' misconduct, which is the principal finding in both the Wells Report and the Vincent letter, Brady had no notice that such conduct was prohibited, or any reasonable certainty of potential discipline stemming from such conduct." The court concludes that, as a matter of law, no NFL policy or precedent notifies players that they may be disciplined, much less suspended, for general awareness of misconduct by others, and it does not appear that the NFL has ever, prior to this case, sought to punish players for such an alleged violation. The NFL announces, which isn't a surprise, that they will appeal that decision. The next week, Tom Brady suits up for the Patriots to begin another NFL season, and with no suspension looming, does what he does best and advances the Patriots well into the playoffs, losing in the AFC Championship. In March, Brady's contract is extended for 2 years, and he seems to be completely off the hook for what he did or didn't do. Then all of a sudden, after Deflategate has been out of the news for months, the United States Appeals Court reinstates Tom Brady's 4-game suspension, and he will now be required to serve the suspension in the upcoming season. The court ruled on the side of Roger Goodell, saying he properly exercised his broad discretion under the collective bargaining agreement, and that his procedural rulings were properly grounded in that agreement and did not deprive Brady of fundamental fairness. 544 days later, on July 15th, Tom Brady announces on Facebook that he will not pursue any further legal action. No, the next step in pursuing legal action would have been a case in the Supreme Court. The Patriots begin the 2016 season without Brady and go 3-1, discover that Jimmy Garoppolo can also throw the ball. Tom returns to lead the Patriots to another Super Bowl victory, and Roger Goodell hands him the Lombardi Trophy. Tom Brady wins again and has another Super Bowl ring to add to his collection. The most perplexing elements of the Deflategate scandal are that the NFL spent upward of $22 million and 544 days to investigate, litigate, and discipline Tom Brady and the organization for an incendiary reason, and that those facts will continue to baffle many football fans. Especially for Patriots fans, the rules violation to this day is considered to be minor and wouldn't be any cause to harm. It would be hard to argue that some underinflated balls was the Patriots won the Super Bowl. To many others, including members of the media, Deflategate was a backdated framing of the league's powerhouse of a football team. It also dragged the golden child of the game and future Hall of Fame quarterback through mud in an endeavor that could have been forgotten easily, and perhaps no one would have complained. Really, the overwhelming opinion is that the NFL had felt they really screwed up the Spygate disciplinary actions years before, and the Deflategate punishment was a makeup call to the league for their mess up the first time. With Tom Brady now moved on to Tampa Bay, the Patriots look different for this season, and any controversy from now on won't include all the same names as before. But to be honest, I can't help but feel like it's extremely strange that a football league would completely smear the name of the face of the NFL. Let me know in the comment section down below, what do you think about the Deflategate saga? And also let me know in the comment section if there are any other scandals you'd like us to cover on this channel. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.